So I don't want to speak for Ben, but I know one of the things that he has said is difficult for him is his schedule is erratic, and quite often he doesn't know ahead of time what it's going to be. So, I can pretty much know, or you can pretty much know, like, oh well, next month I'm going to be gone these days, or this week, Thursday's the late night, or Friday's the early day, or what have you. And quite often, and the same with James, because he'll know, like, oh, I have a conference in 2 months and I'm going to be gone for 10 days. And so he can kind of pre-plan, before I go, I'm going to set myself up for success. And when I come back, I'm going to plan, a couple days of recovery or whatever. And Ben's a little more like, oh, I have to go tomorrow and I might be back in 3 days. I might be back in a week. I'm not sure. I don't even know where I'm going to be. So, he knows where he's going, but he doesn't know where he's staying, So you mentioned routines and how they're flexible. Like, okay, so maybe I go to bed at midnight one night and it's 10 the other night, but within that 2-hour window or whatever, you're pretty much doing the same thing. So other than sleep masks and a couple of those other things you mentioned, do you have any general guidelines or rules that you would recommend that might be able to help him? And Ben, feel free to jump in, give more specifics about some of the challenges you've had, because I think that Lindsay might be able to give a different perspective than me on, or she might know things that I haven't even thought of that might be helpful to you.
Yeah, Ben, can you give me a little more color?
No. My schedule is, when he says erratic, sometimes, knowing what I'm doing tomorrow is planning ahead. The things that become immediately important, I'm kind of managing the crisis of the immediate, because a lot of stuff changes at the last minute, because I deal with a lot of insurance companies and they'll just decide last minute, oh, XYZ is going to happen. Oh, well, thanks for the advance notice. Greatly appreciate that. I guess I'll drive 10 hours tonight. Or last week I drove 5 hours and the guy that was supposed to be there decided on his own, without calling anyone, to just cancel the meeting. And I sat there for 2 hours doing nothing while I wait for this guy. And I made a couple calls and I'm like, hey, where the hell is this guy? And then I call the company that had arranged it. They're like, oh, yeah, apparently he decided to cancel and didn't tell anyone. I'm like, oh, fantastic. Fan-freaking-tastic. The hurricane's happening right now. So, I'm kind of sort of down in that area, trying to balance, trying to be around my family, but at the same time also trying to be available for clients and potential clients, that sort of thing. So I've got a project in Charlotte, North Carolina that I'm trying to manage. So, I went home Saturday. My kids will ask me, like, so when are you leaving? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, not sure. When are you going to be back? I don't know, 3 days, maybe 7. I don't know. If I take one of my kids with me, they're like, how many days do I need to pack for? I'm like, well, 4 for sure, but you better take stuff for 9, just so that if the trip runs long. So, I might get up at 6 o'clock one morning, but, then I run till, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then I'm for me, it's a victory if I can get 7 hours of sleep and not be exhausted the next day. Because you drive 6 hours, it just takes a lot out of you. I'm not as young as I used to be. So, when I drive 10 hours now, I'm I used to be able to just go and blow, and now it's like, if I don't stop every couple of hours, I'm having, I can end up being like, things are stiff and sore and require movement. So, it's a little bit all over the place. There's been a few times where I'm driving and there's literally nowhere to stop. So I'll end up sleeping on an exit ramp or something, because literally I just can't go any further. So if I don't sleep for 30 minutes to an hour, I won't be able to make it to a hotel or my stop or whatever. So, I've got a very high burn rate, and my ability to manage my schedule, I'd say probably 50% of the time I'm having to change what I'm doing because of something somebody either did or didn't do, whether that's an insurance company or a sales rep or a crew or or a client has an urgent need, and if I'm not there, then, potentially it's going to cost me and the company money, that sort of thing. So I don't know, does that help, or is that bounce around too much?
No, that helps tremendously. So I think, having been the bounce around for, times in my life, the big things I can kind of caution you on, or that might help, would be, number one, find some form of routine that when you stop, when you get situated, you're able to ground in. So especially knowing, I've been there, right? You drive, you're just stiff. Like your whole body kind of hurts. Go in, get situated, drop your stuff, do a little light stretching, do a little yoga. I use a website called Aloe Moves, ALOMOVES.com. And they're, 10, 15, 20 minute, all the way up to hour-long videos. If you've got enough energy, a little bit of light stretching, and that goes a long way, even if you just kind of do the baseline, like gym class stretching. Manage inflammation the best that you can. And what that generally looks like for me is hydrating like crazy. Making sure that my diet stays on lockdown while I'm traveling. I don't have a whole lot of options. I've been managing inflammation and food sensitivities and a really touchy body for a number of years. So despite work travel where I've had work trips where I'm in Virginia Beach one day, Orlando the next, Houston the following, New Orleans the next, back in Chicago, and then I'm off to wherever. I always joke that I go on the tour of Whole Foods, right? And if I can, I grab like whatever the local salad is, you pick a state, I've probably been to a Whole Foods in that state. If I have the time and the ability to grab a salad and some fruit, great. Almost every hotel I've ever been in has at least had access to a refrigerator. At minimum, I will grab some fruit from whatever grocery store I can get, preferably organic. And then I have my kind of contingency food. So I utilize Go Macro bars, or different super clean, quick grab type stuff. I'm not a huge fan of processed food, but having something in contingency. I generally travel with, like fresh raisins, or pistachios are a big one for me. But if I can grab grapes, or something that is going to keep me from wanting to kill somebody in the midst of all the stress, but B, it's going to keep me satiated, that's going to keep me away from things that are going to make me more inflamed, that's going to help. Shane and I were talking.
Are there any particular foods that are like an absolute no-no, like create inflammation versus help minimize? You know what I mean? Like, is there any kind of rule of thumb, or like I never do X, or I always do X?
Yeah, a lot of it's individual, but I think general rule of thumb is anything that's going to be quick grab, fast. I don't think I've had fast food, quote unquote, in 15 years. Any of that stuff. I try to stay away from things like dairy and meat, especially if I can't trace the source pretty well. I eat very, very little meat, close to no dairy products. I'll do some very light raw dairy products only. So like raw kefir or raw milk, which is easy to get here in California, but it's in small doses and only out of a medicinal necessity. So dairy, meat tends to be pretty inflaming, especially things like red meat. Lamb is very energetically hot. Beef tends to be a little more neutral. Chicken tends to be pretty inflaming. So if you can get good high quality fish somewhere, if you're swinging through a restaurant, you're going to actually sit down and have a piece of salmon, great. And if it's quick fly stuff, somewhere like Whole Foods generally has a pre-cooked piece of salmon that's, ready to roll. And if I can't do that, I've had times in my travel where I live on Go Macro bars and pistachios and loads of water and, more grapes than a human should probably eat. Or the contingency of like some guacamole and carrots, or, celery and guac, or whatever I can get my hands on that's going to be fresh and easy and not processed. Because managing inflammation is huge. Inflammation negatively impacts
Are Go Macro bars going to be in most convenience stores, or is that more like a Whole Food or Trader Joe's kind of thing?
I've found them in just about most of the major store chains at this point, but you can get them on Amazon too. So when I was using them all the time, I used to just order a case of them on Amazon because it was cheaper.
Okay.
Especially for that quick grab stuff, I'll Amazon, you know, or I'll hit up Prime Now when I'm 2 hours away from somewhere and be like, deliver this to me, have it at the hotel. Hotels will receive Prime Now orders for you.
So you're talking about physical inflammation. What about emotional inflammation? Like, have you done any looking into like anchoring or NLP or any of that stuff? Any tips? Because I know sometimes, you know, because foods have a tendency to be so, you know, they're emotionally attached, not just taste attached to memory and other stuff. I mean, obviously, you know, if somebody has a negative memory attached to a specific kind of food, you know, obviously they're going to kind of avoid that. But I kind of got this idea from the Wolf of Wall Street. Jordan Belfort talks about, he's got some aromatherapy thing that he figured out how to do some anchoring where he can just literally take a shot of this aromatherapy and it helps reframe his mental state, I guess. So does that make sense?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, inflammatory emotions and managing that. I mean, meditation's key. Aromatherapy is hugely helpful. If you know about anchoring and you can do anchoring, fantastic. Some people do better with a physical anchor. Some people do really well with, you know, a sense. Cool. You know, whatever works for you. But if it anchors you and brings you into that moment, do it. Do whatever you can to get that state of calm in your body. I find meditation tends to be kind of a thing. That'll get me back to square one a lot of times, especially if I'm feeling very scrambled, or I'm feeling kind of that outside chaos coming into my my happy little realm in the universe, right? I'll use binaural beats to help keep my brain kind of on the right path and kind of locked and loaded and where it should be. If I'm in an area like an airport, a lot of times I'll use them as a buffer between me and the real world, because energetically, I know I'm very sensitive. So when there's a lot of chaos going on, if there's a storm and there's a lot of flights that are canceled, I can physically feel that energy and that stress, and it gets in me. So for managing inflammation from an emotional standpoint, have some kind of buffer there. You know, find what works for you. For some people, it's music. The binaural beats just work really well for me.
Is that like solfeggio frequencies, or what's a binaural beat? Like a solfeggio frequency, like specific ones, or?
Yeah, they'll be on different frequencies. But yeah, and you can YouTube them and download them. But binaural beats are on different frequencies. They run through both ears at kind of different rates, so it locks in both sides of your brain. And different frequencies have different healing abilities, right, or different purposes. Some of them are more for healing, some are more for concentration, and they're meant to drop your brain into, you know, beta, gamma, theta waves, so that you've got a little bit more of an even keel space to work in. So there's one in particular that I tend to use that I found necessity after my ayahuasca journey. From a biohacking perspective, I had never been so happy to know about having a buffer in my life as when I came back through the Louisville airport after my ayahuasca journey, because the entire world was so loud. And so, like, I was just so unspoken that I needed like an energetic blanket just wrapped around me and hide in a cave for 2 or 3 days. Flying was not optimal. You know, a little bit of a wall between me and that chaos and that energy was hugely helpful.
Huh, okay. What about, have you ever worked with anybody that has the opposite problem? Like, I personally, like if I get focused on something, like I grew up in a house with, like I got 3 brothers and sisters. So the house I grew up in was kind of busy. My room was, we lived in a bunch of different houses, and generally speaking, I ended up doing my homework at the kitchen table because I never really had a desk that had enough space. So, early on, I learned to just literally focus on what I'm doing and tune the entire world out. So, like, I guess I have a natural, like, I don't know, apparently some people say, like, I can get pretty wound up tight and express myself in maybe not very healthy ways. But I can also get very focused to where I'm essentially on lockdown and I have no idea what's going on around me, and that'll frustrate, like, my wife and my kids. They'll be like, hello, hello. Like, they'll have to say my name like 10 times before it registers, oh, somebody's trying to get my attention. So I don't know anything. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to work on awareness for healthy situations versus, I mean, obviously that works. Like, for me to sit in an airport with chaos going on around me does absolutely nothing. Like, I don't care. Like, whatever. I could read a book, and I could read an 800-page book in a day, and the world could be collapsing around me, and I would have no idea.
I think you nailed it. Awareness is key, right? Being aware that you've got that tendency and just checking in with your environment is probably the bigger key in that respect. I tend to kind of be the same way, where if I get locked and loaded into something, but I am very, if I hear something, I'm right there. So for me, it's kind of the opposite. But yeah, in those moments, I would say building awareness, and again, meditation would be really helpful in that type of situation. So being able to kind of lock into what you need and what your environment looks like. And if your wife and your kids, you've got stuff going on and people could potentially need you, just being aware of that and checking in with them often. Like, hey, I know I'm kind of checked out a lot of times, or I know I tend to kind of get locked into my own thing. What would be helpful for you? Do you need anything from me? I'm going to do this, and I'm probably going to get over focused. If you need me, come tap me on the shoulder. Right. One of the tools I use, especially with parents, if they've got kids that are in that age where they're interrupting a lot, right? They're like 3 to 21.
That's a true statement.
Right. From like the minute they start talking until they leave the house. One of the things I'll teach them is it's almost an anchoring technique, where if I need your attention, I'm just going to put my hand on your shoulder. And when you acknowledge me, you put your hand on my hand. All that says is, I hear you, I get you. I'll get you in a second here. Right. But it gets away from that, like, mom, dad, I need you.
Yeah.
I need you. Hey, right. In our family, it goes dad, David. And he's like, what?
Yeah, it's the same thing for me. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when your 10-year-old goes, Benjamin, like, what?
Yeah. What? I heard my name.
Yeah, right. I am a dad. That's true. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It just doesn't register. Yeah. So I find that physical anchoring technique is really helpful, to just like hand on the shoulder. Oh, you need me. Got it. What's up? It's beautiful to keep them from interrupting. It takes a little time to train them, like anything else. But yeah, I find that, especially if you're the kind of person that can block out a lot of that stuff around you, physical touch is hugely helpful.